Father, please watch over him and guide his steps. Give him wisdom and a peaceful heart.
He knelt. The most feared CEO in Seoul, a man who made executives rehearse their sentences before speaking to him, was on both knees before a 4-year-old girl. She placed her tiny hand on his head and prayed, and accidentally whispered the one name that would unravel everything. Because her mother wasn't just his housekeeper. She was the woman his company had silenced, fired and buried. The only person who knew exactly who had been stealing from him for years. Hey family, welcome to my story channel. Please subscribe and give this video a like. Don't forget to share it with your friends and loved ones. Thank you so much for the support. Now, sit back, and let's move into today's story. The phone call came at 11:47 p.m. Jun-ho was still in his suit. He picked up, listened for exactly 40 seconds, then set the phone down on his desk without a word. Park Industries was pulling out. $40 million. Gone. He sat very still. Outside, rain hammered the windows of his Seoul mansion. Inside, everything was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like a warning. Kang Jun-ho was the kind of man who made other men nervous. Not because he shouted, he rarely did, but because when he looked at you, you felt like he could see exactly where you had failed. His employees arrived 30 minutes early just to avoid being the last one in the room when he walked through the door. His executives rehearsed their sentences in the elevator. Nobody, in 10 years, had ever seen him cry. Tonight, the door to that reputation cracked open. He walked to his shelf and pulled out a photograph. A young woman, laughing, holding a cup of coffee with both hands. His sister, Soo-jin, 3 years dead. The last conversation they ever had ended with him telling her she was wrong. Someone inside the company is stealing from us, Junie. You have to look at these files. Min-jae already explained those numbers. You're exhausted. You're seeing problems that don't exist. I work in internal audit. Numbers are literally my job. I said drop it. She dropped it. Then, 6 months later, she dropped everything. An illness. Fast and quiet. And suddenly Jun-ho had a company to run, and a guilt he had no idea what to do with, so he buried it under meetings and decisions and controlled anger. Now the company was bleeding, and the man who had told him those numbers were fine, Seo Min-jae, his CFO, his closest friend for 20 years, had just this morning told the board that the financial irregularities were connected to Soo-jin's time in internal audit. His dead sister, who had tried to warn him. Jun-ho put his face in his hands. That was when the door opened. Not a knock. Just a small push, and a 4-year-old girl with 2 uneven pigtails walked into his study, dragging a stuffed rabbit by one ear. She stopped when she saw him. She did not run. She did not look afraid. Her name was Zuri. Her mother, Amara, was the new housekeeper. Zuri was not supposed to be in this wing of the house. She walked toward him anyway. Are you crying? She asked. No, he said immediately. She tilted her head. Your eyes are wet. He had no answer. She stepped closer and reached up toward his face. But she was too short. She frowned, thinking hard. Then she said the sentence that would change everything. Kneel, sir. You are too tall. I want to pray to God for you. He almost told her to go back to the kitchen. Instead, this powerful, feared, $50 million CEO slowly lowered himself to his knees in front of a child he barely knew. Zuri placed her tiny hand on his head and closed her eyes. God, please help Mr. Kang. Show him what he cannot see. Help him tell the truth, and please make Junie's heart happy again. Jun-ho's head snapped up. Junie. His whole body went cold. Where did you hear that name? Zuri blinked. The lady on Mummy's old phone says it. 3 weeks earlier, Amara Okafor had stood outside a domestic staffing agency in central Seoul, reading a printed advertisement for the 5th time. Private residence housekeeper. Live-in available. Kang household. Her friend beside her said, Amara, you have an accounting degree. I know what I have, Amara said, and walked inside. She was 31 years old. She had left Nigeria 4 years ago, alone, with a baby on her back and a folder of documents pressed flat at the bottom of her suitcase. She had tried to do things the right way. She had sent 3 emails to Kong Global's headquarters. She had posted a registered letter. She had called the legal office twice. The first time, they hung up. The second time, a calm voice told her there was no record of her employment and that further contact would be considered harassment. She was not angry about that anymore. Anger was expensive. She was strategic. The job offer was unusual. The household paid well. The hours were flexible. But every experienced domestic worker in Seoul had turned it down. The reason spread through the network like a quiet warning. The boss is impossible. Amara accepted immediately, because the impossible boss was exactly who she needed to reach. On her first morning, she arrived before dawn, learned the layout of the mansion in under 2 hours, and had every surface in the kitchen gleaming before the cook arrived. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Park, a sharp woman who watched everything, told her she was efficient. "Don't be too eager," Mrs. Park warned. "Mr. Kong doesn't like people who seem like they want something." Amara smiled. "I just like things clean." She was careful. She kept her head down. She did her job without complaint. She watched. She watched how Min Jae, the CFO, who visited the mansion twice a week, positioned himself in every room like a man who owned it. How he touched Junho's shoulder. How he laughed a little too easily. How his eyes moved quickly around a room when he first entered, checking who was present. She had met men like Min Jae before. In Lagos, 3 years ago, one of them had ended her career with a single phone call. She had discovered the problem by accident. A batch of payment confirmations crossing her desk that matched no physical services she could verify. Same addresses. Similar company names. Payments released in clusters, always just under the threshold that would require secondary approval. She had filed a report through the whistleblower system. Within 2 weeks, her manager called her in and placed a letter of termination on the desk. Mishandling of confidential financial records. Violation of internal protocol. "But I followed the protocol," she said. "The protocol says you submit concerns to your direct line manager first. My direct line manager's name appears on 2 of those transactions." The letter did not change. And now, years later, she was cleaning the home of the man who could fix all of it. If she could only find a way to make him listen. The problem was that Junho was surrounded. Every door she could have used was controlled by the same man blocking her. So she waited. And then, one Thursday afternoon, her childcare fell through, and Zuri came to work with her. Zuri was 4 years old, and completely unaware that she was supposed to be afraid of Kong Junho. The first time she saw him, she waved. He stared at her like she had spoken in a language he didn't recognize. "Zuri," Amara hissed from across the hallway. "Come here." Zuri walked to her mother, then looked back at Junho over her shoulder. "Is that the sad man from your drawings?" she whispered, loudly enough for him to hear. He turned and walked away without a word. Amara closed her eyes briefly. Good start. But the next morning, Zuri left a drawing outside his office door. A tall man under a dark cloud, and a small girl beside him holding an umbrella over his head. She had written across the top, in her mother's handwriting that she'd attempted to copy. "From Mr. Kong." Mrs. Park found it and moved to throw it away. "Leave it," Junho said, appearing in the hallway. He picked up the drawing, looked at it for a long moment, then carried it inside. Amara watched from the end of the corridor. She said nothing. Over the following days, something quietly unusual happened. Junho, who spoke to the domestic staff in terse sentences, began tolerating Zuri in a way he tolerated no one else. Not warmly, but tolerantly. When Zuri sat in the kitchen doorway watching him cross the courtyard, he stopped ignoring her and started giving her a short nod. When she asked why he always wore black, he said, "It's simpler." When she asked if simpler meant sadder, he walked away, but slower than usual. "You're playing a very dangerous game," Amara's colleague, Hyunji, told her one afternoon. "I'm not playing anything," Amara said. "You're letting your daughter get attached to this man." Amara folded a tablecloth with careful precision. "Zuri gets attached to everyone. She got attached to the man who repairs the gate." That's different. Why? Hyunji lowered her voice. Because that man doesn't have the power to destroy your life. Amara set the tablecloth down. Someone already tried. I'm still here. After the prayer, Junho did not sleep. He sat at his desk until 3 a.m., turning the word over in his mind like a stone. Juni. His mother had called him that when he was very young. Then Sujin had claimed it, turned it into something teasing and warm. Used it in moments when she wanted him to stop being the CEO and be her brother. Nobody else had ever used it. Not once. He went to find Amara at 6 in the morning. She was in the kitchen, standing at the counter with a cup of tea, not yet aware he was there. He noticed, briefly, that she did not look like someone who cleaned houses for a living. Not the way she stood, not the precision with which she moved. Then he stepped inside and she turned around. The child said she heard that name from a voice on your phone. Amara set down her cup. Her face was controlled. Too controlled, he thought. Yes. Whose voice? A pause. Then, your sister's. He went very still. I need you to explain that to me. Right now. Amara looked at him for a long moment. He watched her make a decision. I'll need my phone, she said. And I need you to promise me that you will listen to everything before you say anything. I don't make promises to household staff. Then I won't play you the recording. He blinked. In 10 years, no one had put a condition on him like that. Fine, he said. Talk. She brought the phone. She played the recording. Amara, I received your report. The transactions are not normal. Keep your original employment records and the confirmation numbers from your complaint. I will investigate from Seoul. Juni does not believe me yet, but I hope he will eventually. The kitchen was absolutely silent. Junho stood with his hand flat on the counter, pressing down hard on the surface like he needed something solid to hold on to. When was this recorded? 3 years ago. 2 months before she died. He looked up. She knew you. She contacted me after I was dismissed. She said she had seen my complaint before it disappeared from the system. Amara held his gaze. Someone deleted it, Mr. Kong. Someone with senior access. And your sister was trying to prove who. He pulled out a chair and sat down. For the first time in 10 years, Kong Junho sat at a kitchen table with a member of his household staff and said, Tell me everything from the beginning. Min Jae found out on a Tuesday. Not from Junho. He had not survived 20 years in corporate finance by waiting for information to reach him. He had people, a personal assistant who noticed things, a contact at the external law firm who owed him a favor, a security consultant who monitored unusual document requests. The document requests told him everything. He sat in his corner office on the 42nd floor and read the list twice. Internal archive access. Sujin's audit files. Original whistleblower submission logs from the Lagos office. He set the paper down and looked out at the Seoul skyline for a long time. Then he called Amara. She answered on the second ring. He could hear nothing in the background. No child, no kitchen sounds. She had been expecting this, he realized. Miss Okafor, he said warmly. I think it's time we spoke honestly. I agree, she said. You've been treated very unfairly. I want you to know that I personally was not involved in the decision to end your contract. That was a management failure at the Lagos level. I see. I'd like to correct that. Formally. He paused. I'm prepared to offer you a settlement, very generous, and a clean professional reference. All I'd need is a brief agreement that this matter is resolved privately. Silence. How much? She asked. He named a figure that would have taken her 4 years to earn. Another silence. Then, let me think about it. Of course. Take a few days. He hung up, satisfied. He had handled messier situations than this. A dismissed junior accountant with an old recording was nothing he couldn't contain. Junho was emotional right now, confused, grieving his sister all over again. But emotion was manageable. It was evidence that was dangerous. And the evidence, he was almost certain, didn't exist in any form that could hurt him. He was wrong. What Min Jae did not know was that Amara had been sitting in Junho's private sitting room when he called, with a lawyer present on silent video call, recording every word. The forensic accountants worked fast. Junho gave them everything. Amara's original complaint references, the transaction numbers she had flagged, Sujin's email records, and the archived files the investigators located using the codes Amara had preserved for 3 years in a folder at the bottom of her phone notes. What they found came back in layers, each one worse than the last. The lead investigator, a quiet woman named Dr. Song, laid the summary on Junho's desk. "Your sister did not approve these payments," she said. Min Jae told the board. She placed hold flags on them. Investigation holds, within her authority as an auditor. Someone overrode those holds and then used her login credentials to reclassify the payments as approved. Dr. Song turned a page. The access logs show those credential changes were made from terminals inside the CFO's department. Junho read the page. "Read it again. Can you prove he did it personally?" "Not yet. What we can prove is that the companies receiving these payments are connected. Shared directors. A relative. A former employee who reported directly to him." She paused. "And we found internal emails in which he instructs staff to override your sister's holds." Using her word, she turned another page. Bureaucratic obstruction. He called Sujin's investigation bureaucratic obstruction. Junho stood up and walked to the window. "He sat at my table," he said quietly. "For 20 years. He came to her funeral." Dr. Song said nothing. In her experience, this was the moment. When the fraud became personal, when the numbers became faces, that clients either collapsed or hardened. She waited. He turned around. "What do you need from me?" She nodded once. "Your signature on the board disclosure. Tonight." He signed. The room was all glass and gray suits and cold morning light. Min Jae walked in looking relaxed. That was the tell. Junho could see it now. He always walked in relaxed, because he always believed he controlled the variables. He scanned the room, saw Amara sitting at the far end next to a lawyer he didn't recognize, and his step slowed by half a second. The board chair opened the meeting. "We've received a report from an independent forensic team. I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Song." Min Jae interrupted. "I think it's worth noting who initiated this report. And who this woman is." He gestured toward Amara, a former employee who was dismissed for cause, who has since been living in Mr. Kang's home as a domestic worker. The board should understand what this is. "What is it?" the board chair asked. "A personal vendetta." Amara's lawyer began to speak, but Amara put a hand on his arm. "May I?" she said to the chair. A pause. A nod. She stood up. She was calm in the way that people are calm only when they have rehearsed the chaos and come out the other side. "I submitted a complaint 3 years ago," she said. "I was dismissed within 2 weeks. My complaint was deleted from the system. I then spent 3 years trying to reach Mr. Kong through official channels. Every attempt was blocked." She looked directly at Min Jae. "I have the reference numbers for every message I sent. I have the read receipts. I have the voice message from Ms. Sujin confirming she received my original report." She sat down. "The forensic team can speak to what they found. I'm just the person who kept the receipts." Dr. Song presented the findings in 11 minutes. When she finished, the room was very quiet. The board voted in less than 4 minutes. Suspension. Access revoked. Immediate referral to authorities. Min Jae stood up slowly. He looked at Junho. 20 years, he said. Junho met his eyes. "She worked here for 3 months. And she kept better records than you did. The company did not recover overnight." Junho had stood in front of his staff and said that clearly, plainly, without decoration. "We will not pretend this is fixed. We have serious work ahead of us." He had laid off no one. He had sold a non-essential property. He had negotiated with banks, delayed withdrawals, appointed an interim CFO with the board's approval and given the audit committee full independence. And then he had stood in front of his employees and said something harder. This company ignored a warning because of who delivered it. A junior accountant in Lagos filed a legitimate report, lost her job for it, and spent 3 years trying to be heard. Our systems failed her. My leadership failed her. I failed my sister. He stopped. That doesn't happen again. 1 year later, Kong Global launched the Sujin Integrity Fund. Amara had completed her local certification by then. She had done it herself, funded partly by the settlement, mostly by her own stubbornness. She worked now for an independent compliance organization. Not for Junho, not under him, not rescued by him. Alongside him, Kong Global was one of her organization's first clients. At the launch ceremony, the auditorium was full. Junho stood at the podium and thanked her in front of everyone. Board members, executives, staff from Lagos on a live video link. She warned this company when speaking carried a personal cost, he said. We ignored her because of her position, not because her evidence was weak. He stepped back from the podium. He looked at Zuri, sitting in the front row in a yellow dress, kicking her feet because the chair was too tall. He walked down from the stage and knelt in front of her. The room went quiet. Zuri grinned. Are you crying again, Mr. Juni? Soft laughter moved through the crowd. Not because I'm hopeless this time, he said. She put her small hand on his head. God, help people listen when someone is telling the truth. And help Mr. Juni not to shout too much. The CEO of Kong Global laughed, a real laugh. Open and unguarded, the kind his employees had never once heard in 10 years. He had spent his whole career believing that power meant never bending. But the night he knelt before a 4-year-old girl was the night he finally became strong enough to hear what everyone around him had been afraid to say. Amara watched from the side of the stage. Zuri had not solved anything. She hadn't uncovered fraud or confronted the board or preserved a single receipt. She had simply walked into a study, found a crying man, and asked him to come down to her level. Sometimes the smallest act of compassion opens the largest doors. And sometimes, the truth just needs one person brave enough to say, "Kneel, sir. I cannot reach you up there." If this story moved you, share it with one person who needs to hear it today. Subscribe for more stories like this. Drop a comment telling me which character spoke to your soul. Was it Amara's patience? Zuri's innocence? Or Junho finally choosing to listen?